What is your client's take on the behavior of the mother?
Well, I'm sort of under certain constraints not to speak ill of anyone involved in this case, that we wouldn't speak ill of one another or respond to just in an effort to try to keep the kids out of social media.
And some of these parenting isms, these cultural isms that have contaminated parenting are things like beliefs that it's my job to make my kids happy.
Give them a magical
And
childhood.
it's my job to give my child a magical childhood. It's my job to make my children smile. It's it's my job to make my children successful.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Wednesday, September 6th, 2023. It's been about a week now since this whole internet blew up about Ruby Frankie and everything that happened down in Ivins, Utah with her business partner and her ex-therapist, Jody Hildebrandt, and a situation involving her children. And during this time, there's been a ton of questions about her husband, Kevin, and where is Kevin? Why is he MIA? What's going on with Kevin? There's been a lot of questions about, well, Kevin was around for a very long time when a lot of this stuff was going on. So why hasn't he gotten in trouble yet? Why isn't there some level of repercussions for her husband? Well, it sounds like his attorneys had a few things to say, and it was kind of strange. He spoke to Chris Cuomo last night on News Nation Now, and he spoke with Good Morning America very briefly. And the attorney was very guarded in what he would share and what he would say. And it seemed more like a domestic civil situation than that's how I felt like the interview was being portrayed by the attorney. Like, as though this was a sort of civil situation between a mom and a dad, and they were going to handle it in court. And there was some sort of gag order that would prevent Kevin from saying anything about what he thinks about Ruby, and how Kevin, through the attorney, wouldn't say yay or nay what his position was about his wife, and seemed to be towing this line as though this is just simply an allegation and that it's not true.
One another or respond to allegations that have been leveled, just in an effort to try to keep the kids out of social media, to tamp this thing down, to do what we can to get these kids back to a good life.
Question here goes to whether or not they were careful with the kids. Did your husband have a role in the behavior that's now being charged?
Absolutely not.
How? When he's the father and he was in the house, how did he not know and not do anything about it?
So his assertion here is that Kevin had no clue what was going on. Mom took the kids out of the county for the summer, and that had he known anything was amiss, he would have gotten involved. And that he's making it sound like they had summer custody, which doesn't even make sense because local outlets, KSL and Fox 13 Now in Utah, in Salt Lake City, got a hold of some reports from Springville PD that show that PD had been called 19 times to the Ruby's house and Kevin's house from 2019 until just October or November, until just August of 2023. 19 times in 4 years. 5 times of those were in the September of 2022. And that was because her daughter, Sherry, had apparently contacted them and said, my mom has been leaving the kids alone. She's down in St. George. She's with her friend and her business partner, and the kids are by themselves. Neighbors call and report that kids are outside playing unsupervised. Neighbors are concerned because the kids are by themselves for a very long period of time. One neighbor provides and says to them, listen, I have video proof of this is the day that she left, that it's been at least 5 days since she's been gone. The kids have been by themselves this whole time. And Springville PD goes out with DCFS 5 different times in that span to try to make contact, and literally nobody makes contact with the kids. They can see them when they look in the window. The kids don't answer the door, and they don't do anything to actually make contact with them. They don't go inside at all. They don't do anything. So the kids were alone outside, are knocking on the door. Ruby's not there. She's not there. And they just let them be there alone. A 9-year-old and an 11-year-old for weeks at a time. This was her daughter contacting them and saying, listen, my siblings are not being supervised. So she also pulled the kids out of school in the fall of 2022. She claimed it was because of TikTok and that they were making them do TikTok dances, and she was really upset about how they were going to be dancing to a song by Flo Rida, Low, and she said it was a horrible song and you shouldn't let that into families' houses. And she met with the principal, and Kevin spoke at the school board meeting about these TikTok dances. By summer 2022, they're split. The kids are in homeschooled, and she's gone and not homeschooling them. So there's truancy here. She's not home, and nobody tries to make contact with these children. How did a system fail this badly? 19 calls to this home in 4 years, and his attorney is going to say, no, all of this is just recent.
Mom had the kids for the summer and went out of the county with the kids. And if he had known of or thought there was, he would have been all over it.
So is your suggestion that everything that has been charged happened after he left?
Correct.
Well, this situation that happened last week is recent, but it seems like Kevin was around when a lot of this was happening. Maybe not what recently happened, maybe not the most recent incident, but isn't there a level of responsibility for a parent? Has he abandoned the kids at that point? Has Ruby abandoned the kids at that point? Is it neglect from the parents? I don't know. I think it's odd, though, that Kevin's attorney is so interested in going out to clear his name publicly and trying to tamp down the media, right? Well, that's not going to happen. He's so interested in disconnecting and trying to disassociate it, but it doesn't make him look good. He looks terrible. He looks terrible because, one, he's coming out and saying, I have nothing to do with this. And two, he's refusing to say that he disagrees with what Ruby did.
So is his position that these allegations are unfair, and is he going to defend the mother?
If the
or does he want the
allegations
kids
are true,
and to keep them away from the mother?
if the allegations are true, my client has never supported, condoned, or even acted in a physical way toward these kids. And I think we're just going to have to let the court system play that out.
He refuses to say that what happened really happened. They kept saying, if this is true. Now, I understand it's an allegation, but if it's true, he says he doesn't condone it. He doesn't support it. But right now, he's not saying, I don't support it. I just want to have custody of my kids. I just want to have custody of my kids. I just want to have custody of my kids. Is Kevin really the best person to have custody of his kids if he's the one that dipped out, or she kicked him out, and kids were not in school, kids were left alone? I mean, where was he last fall when the kids were roaming around in his neighborhood? Why wasn't he at the house if Ruby wasn't there? Where was Kevin during all of this period? That doesn't sound like a dad that cares about the custody or concern of his kids. Like, if those were my kids, there is no way in heck they would be by themselves. I have a 10-year-old, you guys. I can't imagine or fathom him trying to, deal with this world by himself for weeks at a time. It would not happen. Nor would I leave him alone. And if my husband left him alone, you better believe I would be right there like, dude, this kid can't be by himself. These are two parents that like checked out of their responsibility of being parents and wanted to like join a group that allowed them to feel like they didn't have to be good parents and it wasn't their responsibility, because they always would talk about how all of the responsibilities fall on the kids. Like, it's not my responsibility to have a magical childhood. It's not my responsibility to show them love. It's not my responsibility to make them happy. It's not my responsibility to make sure they're fed. It's not.
Taught from the highest towers in every part of the land. And some of these parenting isms, these culturalisms that have contaminated parenting are things like beliefs that it's my job to make my kids happy.
Give them a magical childhood.
It's my job to give my child a magical childhood. It's my job to make my children smile and laugh. It's my job to make my children successful. It's my job to prevent my children from having pain, right? All of these, they all come from the same place.
They're making it seem like parenting is a chore. And if you're looking at parenting as a chore, you shouldn't be a parent. And maybe that's why he shouldn't have custody right now. But that's just me.
And so I just walked around my life trying to control all of those evidences so that people would think a certain way about me. And I guarantee that statement describes the entire world. Why? Why was I pursuing this? Why was I placing so much value on money? Why was I placing so much value on sex? Why was I placing so much value on my title and my career and where I work? All of that stuff.
To me, all of this really just feels like damage control. Like Kevin is trying to get ahead of something. Like, he knows his wife is in deep trouble right now. And it doesn't look good for a father to be MIA when all this is happening, when they are separated, but they're not divorced. And they're acting like this is just a custody situation. Like, mom had custody for the summer. So trying to alleviate Kevin's responsibility, like it wasn't my responsibility to know what they were doing. You mean, Kevin, that in that time during the summer, you didn't try to call your kids or see how they were doing, check in with them? It doesn't pass the sniff test. Okay, so KSL got a hold of the reports, okay? And they say in April of 2022, Kevin was still in the house by this point, okay? So they've said that Kevin and her have been separated for 13 months, meaning that they have been separated since July of 2022. So in April 2022, they get a report that they were alerted that 2 children were running out in the road unsupervised. And someone went out to the house, they drive through the area, and they wrote that they didn't see any kids in the street. A few months later in September, on the 18th, they respond again to the house. This time, this is Sherry calling them and saying that the neighbors informed her that their siblings were left home alone while she was in St. George, her mom. Officers see the children going up and down the stairs. They're out of sight. Nobody answers the door. Neighbors have evidence gathered around, worried about these kids, right? They go back on the 22nd, 23rd, 26th, and October 3rd, all these different times to try to make contact with Ruby and the kids. Nobody answers the door. At some point, they just don't follow up. And they talk to DCFS and says that confidentiality and the privacy of the children and the families that we work with, they can't share information on the case. And the news wanted to know, are you doing anything with changing here? Because it sounds like you went out here all these different times. The kids were being left alone. You never made contact with them. You let the kids stay there alone. It seems like the police, because they were in an affluent, well-to-do area where there's wealthy people that live there, just felt like it was much to do about nothing. I think a lot about what kind of privilege her stature, her fame, and her wealth played into the fact that they just let it go because she was a YouTuber. And, we always get complaints about people on YouTube. Did that allow them to make it seem like nothing had happened? You have their own daughter calling and you're not actually making contact with the children. You can't force the kids to open the door, but this seems like such a significant, like, just mismanagement of this case. How do you have a kid that's there, you keep going back day after day after day, mom's still not back, by the way, and you're not trying to like get a warrant to make sure the kids are okay? You can see them, but there's no adults in there. There's laws about kids being left alone for long periods of time, and I'm pretty sure that kids under a certain age can't be home alone for weeks at a time. And then what about school? Who's managing their school if mom's gone? It seems like a lot of agencies failed these kids, and it seems like what my opinion is that I think the kids were placed in Ivan's before the summer, because I'm assuming that once Ruby found out what was going on with her neighbors, she had to remove the kids so that they would stop contacting CPS, because there's not any other reports to the agencies after that. And then the next time contact is made, it's a completely different county, and this is the county that finally steps in and does something about it. What happened to Ruby and Kevin where they just stopped wanting to be parents? And why does he think it's necessary to go up on interviews and think, like, I want my kids in custody, I had nothing to do with this, but then not denounce what Ruby's done? If you're separated from her, dude, just say, like, I don't agree with this is horrible. But I feel like if Kevin were to say that, maybe he would be exposing himself to his own charges. So he's just going to say nothing. Either way, he probably should have just stayed quiet. Sometimes your reputation doesn't matter. Sometimes tamping down and damage control isn't necessary. At this point, the damage is done, and there's real people and real kids' lives that are harmed by this, that are still recovering. And I don't think that Kevin's going to be the one that successfully helps them heal. But that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.